Good. So this talk is "And the Clouds Break," right? Looking at business continuity and in the day and age of cloud computing. My name is Wolf Goerlich. I am involved with the Michigan security community. I'm involved with conferences like Converge and B-Sides, and I'm also the Vice President of Strategic Security Programs, kind of a mouthful, where in my day job I look at different various security programs like incident response, business continuity, help them figure out what they need to do and what they can do better. Get some things to my name, some reasons to be here. Like, I got some celebrity endorsements, that's always important. So shout out to Swift on security for that. And before coming to CBI, I was at a money management company where about 10 years ago now, we actually won an award. IDG does an award service for infrastructure they used to, where we won an award for business continuity and disaster recovery, which is just like the Oscars, all the glam, the glitz, the photos, the red carpet. No one really cares, but my mom was very proud of me. So maybe you guys would be impressed by that too. So I have done a little with business continuity. I have been doing it for many, many years. Way too many years. And a lot's changed. So that's what I want to talk to today, is some of the things we've seen that's changed. And I also want to talk today about some of the things that stay the same, right? Some consistent common themes that we see in the continuity and the recovery space, and taking those themes forward. Things that we were really comfortable with maybe 10, 20 years ago, that in this time of DevOps and continuous integration, continuous deployment, and cloud, sometimes we forget. And my story really begins at an airport. I fly way too much. And I was actually flying out to a customer. Coincidentally enough, same customer I'm at this week. I was flying out about a year ago, and I don't know about you guys. You guys have like your own airport, right? You know your own airport. You like know where to park, know how to get in, know how to do it quick. So I have my earbuds on. I'm jamming away. Got my bag. I'm rolling down, and there's a camera crew. I'm like, why is there a camera? But I don't care because I was late because I cut it too close. So I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I get in the line. I don't really care that the line stopped. Well, I do care that the line stopped. But I don't really care about all the buzz because I got to get to my flight. And people start leaving the line. I'm like, this is great. They're going to get out of my way. And I get up to the TSA, and he scans my badge. He goes, are you Mr. Goerlich? I'm Mr. Goerlich. And I go, I really got to get through because I'm now like down to like 20 minutes to my flight. I got to get through. He goes, oh, you're not going to have any problem. And I should have known then. But I'm like, oh, yeah, good. That means you're going to like fast track me through, right? So I get through, get on, I'm looking at my mobile, my flight's on, everything's good. I get up to the gate, I take my earbuds out. I'm like, why is people not boarding? And they're like, oh, we're sorry, the plane's not leaving. I'm like, but the plane says it's boarding right now. Yeah, we know, but it's not. Like, what do you mean it's not? I got to get to my customer. Like, well, sir, did you see the camera crews? I'm like, yeah, I kind of went around them to get here, but I need to get on my plane. Did you see everyone getting on a line? Yeah, I did, but I got to get on my plane. You see, Delta is down. We've crashed our systems. I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. How long? Why is the system not up? When is it going to get? All the same questions everyone else asked. They're like, we don't know. So I sat there and did what any reasonable adult in the modern times would do. I tweeted angry things at Delta. And I'm like, why is this not up? When's it going to get up? What's going on? And some people jump back in and we're like, well, you got to realize that business continuity is really hard in airlines, and I work in an airline, and we got mainframes, we got all this old stuff. I'm like, I don't care. I need to get to my customer. I'm like doing angry phone calls to the airlines and the customer, and I finally did get there. But I was stuck in the airport long enough to start realizing and remembering all the stuff for business continuity and thinking, why? Why did you guys do this? Why did we fail? What was the underlying cause? And when Delta started digging into it and the news started coming out, it was a power loss. One data center lost power in Atlanta. And of course, all Delta is in Atlanta. And that crashed their mainframe. And they didn't have anyone who knew how to bring up the mainframe. But it's okay because the mobile apps were all on cache mode. So everyone on the mobile app on the website was like, we're okay. And so we all went to the airport and got to the plane. We're told otherwise. And it was down for 5 frickin' hours, right? 5 hours before they started getting people up. And then it took another 48 hours to catch up. And it was a real big pain in the ass. But it was also a real big financial impact. Delta released numbers. $177 million they lost. $177 million because they lost power, and then our mainframe went down. They couldn't figure out how to get it back up. Hugely impactful. So the first thing, whenever we're talking about business continuity, is that impact, right? How much money do you stand to lose, and how much money should we pay to protect it? And there's some formulas for that. There's, the standard risk formulas. It looks something like this, right? How much should we lose if it happens once? Well, we know $177 million. How often does it happen? Turns out airlines are down a lot, right? Because of power outages. We had, British Airways a couple days ago, U.S. air flights about a few years ago. They're down pretty frequently. So if we throw a number out, let's say 1 in every 10 years, some organization like Delta could face this. We can then say, all right, what does that math look like? How much should we spend to protect us, right? And the annualized loss expectancy looks like this. If you got $177 million, 1 in 10 years, you should probably be spending about $17 million. And that begins to give us some idea of what type of budget we have, what type of effort, right? A thumb in the wind of what we should do to protect something like a mainframe. Same exact process could be handled by any piece of technology we have, including cloud apps, right? But so oftentimes we don't think about it because we just got the Amazon bill and we're up and operational. So, how much money is actually Delta spending? We had no idea. They're not going to tell us, no matter how many angry tweets I send. But we do know that they clearly recognized an issue. They were spending, was $150 million for IT in 2016, and then went up to $450 million. Someone lit a major fire, right? Someone's like, no, we can't have this happening again. Invest, get us better. And I like that. I like that idea, right? But how do we know how much money to burn? And how do we know which money we should be burning and where? Part of it goes back to understanding what everything is that we have. And that starts out with the business process, right? What is the particular business process? What does it mean to the organization? Who are the key people? What's the key technology? What's the facilities that you need? And what makes it all happen? First cut, understanding what it means to the organization. It's like payroll, HR, marketing, production, what have you. Second cut is, all right, that's fine. How does the data actually flow to support that process? And the second cut is pretty important because you'll have conversations like, hey, we need business continuity. And you go to the person, what do you need? And you're like, I need Office. And we're like, great, we have Office. And then there's a disaster. We're like, we gave that guy Office. He's like, what the hell, dude? I have none of my files. Like, you didn't say you needed files. Well, what am I using Office for? Like, oh, okay, fine. Same thing with cloud apps, right? We need Salesforce. That's all we need. Great. Disaster happens, you still have access to Salesforce. And you're like, fantastic. Now, where do I put in my purchase orders? I'm like, wait a minute, who said anything about purchase orders, right? Understanding the full data flow, both internal and external and into the cloud, is so paramount because that's where we begin to notice all the little gaps that get us into trouble when we actually have a disaster. Second thing is taking that data flow and then mapping it to the enabling IT, right? So you have the business process and you have the IT that actually is driving it. And this is where we get to IT components that we might not often think about. Perfect example, I know this organization, they've got a cloud app. This cloud app does all this great stuff. It's their marquee application. It's their main way of communicating with their customers and communicating internally. And everything's in the cloud and everything's bright and shiny, and by God, if they're not doing DevOps. Then their data center, which has now been shrunk, ended up being a closet, goes down. You wouldn't think that would be a problem, right? Because everything's in the cloud and everything's shiny. No one can log into the application. Why not? Well, when they started tracing it out, their entire authentication mechanism was based around Active Directory in their data center, which was then moved to a smaller, older computer and put in this little closet. And once that went down, the entire app was down. Like, we should have thought, maybe we need ping, maybe we need this. And then they started going through the process of, investing more and updating it. But you're not going to catch that without actually starting at the business process, going to the data flow, and then going to the IT diagrams. It's all about knowing what we have and knowing what it means. And using a series of discovery tools and discussions and conversations to get there. And it's really difficult to do this. So a recent survey, I think this came from Symantec's threat report, if anyone follows Symantec, found that CIOs think, maybe we use about 30 or 40 apps. That's it, 30 or 40 cloud apps. End of story. You guys want to take a guess at how many were actually in the organization? 30 to 40,000. Pretty damn close. Yes. Some have that many. The average is running around 928. Thousands of cloud apps, but the CIO only knows like 1/10 of them. Craziness. Craziness. So we have to begin to get our hands around what the business is doing and what we have and what it means. Basic block and tackle with asset management. We do that, we can start doing this concept of protecting the organization, its ability to achieve its mission by protecting the IT that enables its mission. If you've seen any of my talks, you probably heard me say this because I say this way too often, and I apologize in advance. But the point is, from an availability perspective, we don't know what we are relying on to achieve the organization's mission. We don't know what we should be investing in. And moreover, when we do use that lens of protecting the organization's ability to achieve its mission, we can then make some good trade cost analysis, right? So you're saying this process should do this. We need $17.7 million to protect, and but if you had $1 million, you could make more, right? You can have those conversations, those trade-offs to move the budget around and do more to protect the organization. So when you look at the business process, it's not only about what happens when it goes down, it's also about what that business process contributes when it's up. And looking at the intersection, when it's down and when it's up, gives us some insight as to how much effort and time we should spend on it. And once we figure that out, we can drill down one level further with business impact analysis and say, okay, what would each one of those impacts look like? What would it mean to customer service, competitive advantage, management decisions, reputation, brand, blah, 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 blah. Take the business process that we've already mapped out, do these charts, and then bubble up which ones would have the biggest impact on the organization and which ones could be down for a while, right? Maybe marketing is really, really important for the type of organization we're running, and maybe HR can be down for a few days and we don't care. Or maybe we're a staffing company and HR has to be up all the time, but marketing can probably be down for a couple weeks and yeah, we're not going to have this pretty grasp, but we can get by. Understanding what each thing means in terms of the organization's mission allows us to do some tiering and allows us to come up with some cool strategies. And then we can figure out, all right, once we know what we have, what the hell should we do when something bad happens? I saw this picture, this guy's like my hero. I'm like, I want to mow a lawn in the middle of a tornado. That looks badass. And so depending on who I say that to, anyone in Michigan's like, yeah, that's really tough. Anyone who's like born in Tornado Alley is like, no, I used to do that. We used to like eat ice cream and watch as the porch was blowing off and go, oh, I hope I didn't have anything in that porch. Different risk tolerances, right? It's amazing. But when you start to think about, all right, what events would happen, how would that impact the technology, and how would that technology being impacted affect the business process? That nest of events allows us to narrow in on what we need to do. And know that we're looking at the impact, right? Not the event. Prevent the impact. Because you can't prevent events, you can't prevent tornadoes. But also this idea of looking at the impact allows us to make simpler plans, clearer strategies. So oftentimes, when I'm talking to folks who are new in business continuity, they're like, all right, this is great. I've got my plan for ransomware. Okay, good. And I've got my plan for if the hackers come. All right, that's 2 strategies. And I got my plan if this happens and a denial of service happens, if there's a fire, if there's a flood, there's an asteroid, this, and pretty soon they're maintaining like 1 million different plans for all these different scenarios. I'm like, no, there's just too much. And then that's the type of company that 5 years later, when you're assessing their plan, you go and look at it, and you're like, you know, you haven't updated these documents in 5 years. Like, yeah, well, we got busy. So it's so important to kind of narrow in on just a few things that you can do well. All right, from a business continuity perspective, there's some things that have changed. There's some things that have stayed the same with business continuity. And a lot of it has to do with the pace of technology, but also a lot of it has to do with the way humans can absorb the pace of technology. A good metaphor for this is like buildings, right? You guys go around to most small towns, and all the buildings are like 4 floors. You guys ever notice that that's all like 4 floors? Never any taller than that. There's a reason for that. Part of it is disaster recovery. Part of it is if there's a fire, most people can escape a building by running down 4 flights of stairs in time to live to fight another day, which is good. So there's fire code around that. But another part of it is when elevators came and all the buildings were 1, 2, or 3 floors, they didn't know what to make of that, right? The first elevators appeared late 19th century. People still had 4-story buildings, and they were like, okay, well, elevators are kind of cool, I guess. Now I don't have to run up and down the stairs. I guess it's okay for old people because they don't like to walk up the stairs. And then the rich people were like, well, I need to have an elevator because it's a status symbol. And no one really knew what to do with elevators. It wasn't until 1910, 1915 that people were like, wait a minute, the thing in our building, right? These are the kids who grew up with elevators. Wait a minute, the thing in our building. We can now make really tall buildings, right? Like, I never thought of it. I just thought of it as a way to, I was feeling lazy or I wanted to feel like I was rich. No, I think we can make taller buildings. And if you plot it over time, 1 to 2 story buildings, 4 story buildings, all of a sudden we get this massive jump when the first people started realizing that if they put in elevators in place, you could reach the skies, right? This is where we had this massive build of buildings reaching all the way up to the Empire State Building. It took almost 20 years from the time the elevator was built to people realize that they could build that high and completely re-envisioned how buildings would work, and hence the modern city was born. In much the same way, we're starting to see this with cloud. It was actually codified and studied by several economists and sociologists and psychologists, but one of my favorite guys who did this was Joseph Schumpeter, who was an Austrian economist, and he coined this name Kuznets cycles. And really all you need to know is it's really fun to say Kuznets cycles. Every 20 years, there's a flip, right? In the beginning of the 20 years, there's a bunch of technology, and we're like, yeah, I'm going to try and do the same thing I've always done. At the end of the 20 years, enough people have gone through that they start seeing new ways of innovating, new ways of doing things in a different way. When applied to computing, we start looking at business continuity. Business continuity was 50s, right? 1950s. What are we going to do? We're going to rebuild a building. We're going to have a hot site. We're going to have the same type of equipment in both locations. Then, of course, we got personal computers. And then all of us grew up with personal computers and started doing hacking and all sorts of crazy stuff. Around 1995, the internet comes in, and around 20 years later, which is where we are today, that's when people start going, wait a minute, cloud. Cloud's pretty cool. I could use cloud. I could use 30,000 applications instead of just the ones in the mainframe. I could build things in a different way. I could deliver services and everything without people having to get on the console. Maybe we don't necessarily have to own everything, put everything in our own walls. And it's at that tipping point, the end of that 20-year cycle, that everything changes. And I was thinking about this when I was doing my job. In the middle of a business continuity assessment, I jumped in, of course, because as a consultant, you're like, I need to do something. I know this. And with all the hubris of someone who's done it before, you're like, I can do this. Count me in. And you jump into a project, right? That's like consulting 101. And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm sensing a theme. I'm sensing there's something different here. And I was doing these assessments, and I looked pretty much like this, right? Going to every one of the guys going, oh, so tell me, what would you say you do here? And they're like, we do stuff with stuff, and the stuff means this. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Tell me more about the stuff. And one thing about interviews, by the way, if you're doing business continuity or security in general, by interviews, the key thing to know is everything in an interview sounds like this. Everything's pretty and fine, and everything's great, and all they need is office, and they contribute amazing stuff, and there's an interview, and there's all the security and compliance you could want. I've got several team members who go with me on these assessments, and they've all gotten the habit of just checking little things. So, for example, I was on assessment a couple weeks back, and they're like, we rotate our TLS certificates every 365 days. It's like, that's great. And that's on this portal that you gave me, right? Yes, that's on the document management system. Great. Opens the browser, clicks the button. How come this certificate hasn't been rotated in 4 years? Oh, well, that's a good point. So we get really good at checking these things, because the reality is, behind the scenes, it's not as pretty, right? The reality is, behind the scenes, there's a lot of stuff going on. So when you do anything with interviews, it's always important to do a couple of technical checks, a couple deep dives, walk through, ask people different ways, different things, to get to the reality. But, enough of that side, I'm playing the bobs, and I'm going around asking all these people, and everyone's telling me the same thing. All I need is an internet connection, an email, and my 100 favorite cloud apps. Okay, next person. All I need is internet, and email, and Salesforce, and these other apps. Next person. All I need is internet, email. By the fourth person, I'm like, let me guess, all you need is internet and email? They're like, yeah. Like, well, then why do we have this whole building and a data center and everything? I'm like, I don't know, I don't use any of it. Everything was cloud. Everything was cloud. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, I went into this thinking business continuity, I was going to have to help them with their backups and their DR plan for their building and where are the people going to work if this building isn't available. Everything was in the cloud. And it was so eye-opening to me that we have really, truly, and entirely reached the end of that Kuznets cycle. I have no idea what that's going to mean for the next 20 years, but cloud has become incredibly pervasive. We're still making lots of mistakes, of course, but incredibly pervasive. So before I talk about specific strategies to recover, let me just jump into some background on business continuity disaster recovery to level set everyone in the room. Obviously, you have normal stuff, right? Everything is normal and life is good. And then the lightning bolt happens. The asteroid occurs. The tornado is in the backyard. Something bad goes on. We got to bring back those systems and make them operational to a point in time before that occurred, right? That recovery point, sometime in the past, hopefully really close to when that disaster occurred. Everyone and their brother today would tell you that it's instantaneous, you're not going to lose data. The reality is, depending on your bandwidth and how far your sites are, there's always some data lost, be it minutes, be it hours, be it days. So we got to recover back to a point in time. So we bring the systems back up, then we bring the applications back up. How long that takes is the recovery time objective, right? How long it takes start to finish to get these systems and apps up so that people can go about doing business operations, doing the business process. And everything is nice and happy. Some key things there is not just the data, making sure the applications are up. With cloud, making sure that means they still have access to the applications that are hosted outside of our building, looking at impacts on the whole chain. Disaster recovery is the tactical way of getting systems and apps and operations back in place. And of course, business continuity is a strategy for doing that, along with the strategies and procedures for keeping the system alive. Business continuity should be running all the time, hopefully, such that the organization knows what it has, knows what it means, and knows what they stand to lose. So, some more definitions, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Business impact analysis, what I talked about earlier. What do we have? What does it mean? What's it doing? Business continuity should be about strategy, right? And recovery should be the tactics. Business continuity should be ongoing. It should be an ongoing process with buy-in from the top, hopefully executive sponsorship, a committee that drives it, whereas disaster recovery, hopefully, is a point-in-time exercise existed around a very specific procedure to bring up as a very specific business function and get us back to work. There's programs in business continuity. The procedures fall in disaster recovery along with the run books. And then, of course, you have your recovery point objective, the point in time before the event that you're recovering to, recovery time objective, how long it takes to get back in operations. And the point and time are both driven by that math we talked about earlier, which is how much money are we losing over time versus how much money should we invest so we can get things back up really, really quickly. That all makes sense before I go forward? Cool. Okay, now the cloudiness. New threats, new assets, new strategies, new people to chat with. Obviously new threats, everything's on Amazon, everything's on Azure, everything's on Google. What could possibly go wrong? You guys probably saw Amazon went down. It was terrible. It broke Twitter. That was terrible. 4 hours it was down, and 150 million in that time period lost by businesses, not by Amazon, but by all their customers who lost other applications. Now, if you're familiar with Netflix, you probably guys have heard of the Chaos Monkey. The Chaos Monkey runs around and it stops instances all the time and breaks things, and we can make sure the business can keep running. Really damn cool thing. Most IT organizations have their own Chaos Monkeys vis-a-vis the help desk. That's a whole other story. The interesting thing about Amazon and the Chaos Monkeys is Chaos Monkey and most of the work for resilience that's built by organizations is at that app layer, right? It doesn't actually affect the infrastructure layer. So if you do something like, I don't know, break storage or break the billing components, everything comes tumbling down. And so when they posted the results of this, it was pretty damn interesting to me. The bottom line was one command was entered by one person to remove one server, but he missed a flag and removed a good chunk of the billing system and all the storage systems. One typo, one flag, $150 million. That's my favorite typo. I wonder if that guy still has a job. That's a whole other story. But that's got to go somewhere in a resume. You know, do you ever do anything badass? Oh yeah, I did. What was that? You ever hear of the $150 million typo? That was me. I'm hiring you. I need a Chaos Monkey. This is also the reason, by the way, if you talk to any hardcore DevOps guys, any CI/CD guys, any automation guys, this is what they point to, because if you keep people off the console and you only do manual processes and tests and do all the automated processes in production, the shiny new future, right? the Empire State Building is that these sort of things should never happen again. We should be protected against that. Which is probably true, but that just simply means we're going to make bigger, different mistakes. The other one that happened recently was on the infrastructure side. DNS was down 9 hours. Took off the entire East Coast of the U.S. for internet. Again, broke Twitter. I hate that. The cause of this was a denial of service. The cause of that was a massive denial of service, predicated in part by Internet of Things and Merari and this new botnet that was built. But be it whatever it is, Merari or Internet of Service or fridges or traditional IT, the fact is that we become incredibly reliant on this utility computing, right? We become incredibly reliant on the Internet, which means TCP/IP functioning correctly, which means routing functioning correctly, which means DNS functioning correctly, which means 1,000,001 things that I kind of feel like the old guy was like, these kids these days, they don't know how to use chalkboards. I'm like, these kids these days don't know how to subnet. And you're like, no, but we don't need to. I'm like, yeah, but you kind of do, because bad things happen. So denial of service took all that offline. Brand new threat, right? And so after that, a lot of organizations were like, what do we need to do to protect against denial of service? And we're like, insurance or go to a different building. If they're after you, you're done, right? When it's 275 gigs at your little Comcast router, you're done. So that's the new threats, right? Key impacts to IT infrastructure in shared hosting environments that bubble up and take down our ability to access those environments, those apps, those services that are running on top of them. There's also new assets we need to consider when we back up. Now, in the old days, those things like, yeah, we got the data, so we're good, right? And you're like, yeah, but how do people get at the data? One of the things that happened was, this was a customer of mine, God, almost 20 years ago. No, more than 20 years ago now. We built a business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan. We had this backup rotation. And yes, kids, we used to have tapes and we had rotations, and by God, we labeled them Monday through Friday. And it was great. And it was proven, and it was cost effective. And we had this hot site that they had found clever ways to save money, and it was glorious. And then we got this call. Well, actually, I got a page because, again, this was old. So they're like, we need you. It's not coming up. So I'm like, all right, I'm in. I get in my car. I'm racing down there, bat signal going. And get to the client site. I throw open the door, and I do that one step out like Bruce Willis would do. This is how it looks in my head. Probably not that cool. And another consultant was arriving at the same time, and he pulls out his Pelican briefcase, and we're like, let's do this. We're going to show them how to bring this stuff up. We know what we're doing. And we get in, and they're like, here's our backup tapes. And we're like, perfect. And here's the servers. And we're like, excellent, let's go. And they're like, okay, now what do we do? I'm like, we got to restore them. And they're like, but with what? Like, the backup tape library? Like, no, we cut that so we could save money. So we had all the tapes, all the servers, no way to restore. No way to restore. They were down for 48 hours before we found a tape library that worked. It was god-awful, right? But these are the types of things that used to happen in the old days because we would overlook little details. Another little detail, and unfortunately this happened to me when I was at the financial services firm, drivers. We were cutting edge because we no longer use tapes. We use virtual storage replication. We replicated all our data over to our other site, and we went to enact DR, thankfully not in real, in exercises. I'll talk about exercises in a little bit. We went to restore in an exercise, and we booted up all the servers onto their happily replicated drives. Physical servers? Yes, I know. Old days. You know, we forgot drivers. None of the systems would talk in the network because there was different network cards in between the two different driver sets. No way to recover. So these little things always tend to bite you in the ass. But today these little things are something a little bit different. Today it's more like, okay, you got your data and your apps, but you want to work with it too. Right? So if you look at things like CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous deployment, the ability to control the apps, control the environment, do the DevOpsy thing where everything is, infrastructure as code, we're starting to see organizations not replicate that. So now they go into a DR environment, they got the data, but they need to stand up the servers, they need to stand up the instances, they need to deploy the changes, deploy the code, and they don't have Jenkins, or they don't have Chef in the recipes, right? Or they don't have Puppet. So this is now the drivers, right? This is now the backup tape of the cloud era. Do you have your CI/CD? Is it over in the other environment? And can you push those changes and manage the code, manage the infrastructure when you fail over from, one region in Amazon to another region in Amazon. Anyone working with this right now? Anyone run into this yet? Oh, you guys will. Don't you worry. It's coming. More and more organizations we're seeing that are doing cloud. They're doing everything through the DevOps perspective. And it's great. All the admins have everything because we trust everyone. And they're like, make us secure. And you're like, okay. But from a BCP DRP perspective, this has to be replicated over, right? So when we talk about know what we have and know what we mean, it also becomes, in terms of automation, when you automate everything, automation suddenly means everything. We've got to have those automation tools considered and moved over to that site. So those are some of the new assets we need to consider. There's also new strategies, right? It was a time and place where we had the hot site, and the hot site was an exact mirror of production. Then we had the warm site, which was, like a pretty close approximation. God help us, I hope we have a tape drive. And then the cold site, where we just have a building. What do you do in that building? I don't know. We'll figure it out if there's a disaster. It should be fine. We thought we were pretty cool when we were like, hey, we got hot, cold business processes where, depending on how important the business process is, we replicate all the IT infrastructure needed for that in full or in part. But nowadays, especially in the DevOps world, we're getting to a point where we're hot, warm, cold featured. These features are shared across multiple different business processes. They are shared infrastructure, shared components that are tied back to platform as a service, and either they can be down for a long time or they have to be back up almost immediately. So we're moving closer and closer down to the feature level and further and further away from the the holistic site level. We do that. A couple things are important. One is customize, right? Avoid that one-size-fits-all approach. We know that this particular app, MongoDB, has replication with MongoDB. Okay, we'll do that. We know this particular one process over here is running in the ELK stack. So all right, so we know that this is running in Azure, and Azure has multiple zones. It gets very complicated very quickly. But avoiding that one-size-fits-all approach allows you to be more cost-effective and tier things within that, $177 million loss, $17 million budget perspective. Other thing is being very critical, right? Being critical means including the critical components that are required to get everything back up and running. That Active Directory that's in a closet somewhere, that is now the dependency for the major application. Going native, leveraging IaaS and platform as a service recovery features. Thankfully, this is the business they're in, Amazon, Microsoft, what have you. Thankfully, they are looking very closely at this, and it's available. So they have a lot of native features that we can use. So when we go ahead to design these strategies, we can leverage those native features. And then automating it, again, with those same tools I mentioned, such that when things go bad, we can just run a script and bring everything back up, as opposed to having to get on the command line and reinitiate 100 servers and hope everyone is typing in the same thing every time, and hoping we didn't hire the $150 million typo guy. Happens. So, and then finally, cloud has new stakeholders, right? And there's two parts of that. One is, with all these different vendors and all these different cloud applications, having a way that we have a common pipeline that they can report incidents to our BCP DRP team, right? So when Amazon goes red, it's not someone else heard it and they heard it and somehow it gets to us. There's a common pipeline where that message is going in and getting communicated and instantiating disaster recovery. And the other side of that is communicating back. So we see there's an outage, we see there's a hack, we see something terrible is going on. How do we then report it to all these different vendors that are underlying our infrastructure, both platform as a service and software as a service? So two-way communication in for our activities, and then out back as we're completing things. Any questions on that before I go forward? No? Good deal. So let's talk a little bit about the disaster recovery side of it and the strategy. So in terms of the CUSNet flip, right? Those cycles, those 20-year cycles. Another example that I always think is fascinating to me is manufacturing. But then again, I grew up in Detroit, so I'm kind of like born and bred into manufacturing. But if you think about the early factories, there are these massive, massive steam engines, right? One steam engine would run an entire factory. You're like, how the hell do you do that? Today we have 1,000,001 components to make a factory. And if you guys have seen in the work in the industrial space for manufacturing systems, it's like millions of different ICS systems. What the hell do you mean you did off of one steam engine? Well, it's simple. We used a belt. We ran that belt throughout the entire thing, and God help us if the belt broke, but we had one steam engine to power that belt. So here's a factory that's running on electric. When the factories then, early 20th century, switched off steam to electric, they didn't go, oh, this is great. We'll put little electric motors in each one of the stations and then we'll wire it up to the internet. They went, no, we already got a belt. We'll just move that really expensive, heavy steam engine and we'll put in place this little electric motor. And that's what you see here, this electric motor that's bolted on to where the steam engine used to sit. That concept of, okay, here's how we always did it. Now we've got this new tool, so how are we going to use it? We're just going to do what we always did, but a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper, is the beginning of the Kuznets cycle, right? That's where we usually start from. From business continuity perspective, all the old recovery strategies still apply, and this is how a lot of people still think about it. We used to recover tape to physical hardware. Okay, that's one recovery strategy. Then we got a little bit better. We're like, okay, we can replicate from one physical hardware to another. All right, that's another one. Like, hey, wait a minute. Virtual machines are a thing. Wouldn't it be cool if instead of having to maintain all that equipment at the warm site, if we just had a VMware or a Hyper-V box? Like, yeah, that's brilliant. You should totally get a award for that. We're going to replicate into a VM. We're like, awesome. And then they're like, you know what? I don't know that we need to run on bare metal. Well, now we're replicating VMs to VMs, right? So you start to see that step-by-step progression of just doing what we used to do, but a little bit better. And of course, that means when cloud came about, people were like, great, now we'll just replicate those VMs to the cloud. It's just another data center. Like, yay. This is what I call the yay, we're in the cloud strategy. Because what a lot of people do, they're like, all right, we are totally in the cloud. You're in the cloud? We're totally in the cloud. How are you in the cloud? We're sending all our VMs to Microsoft. That's cool. That is a really nice belt around your factory. So the important thing here is, the first generation, the pioneers oftentimes get it wrong because we bring our own biases and we bring our own way of doing things, right? From elevators to the vertical cities, people had to step back and reconceive what it meant to be an elevator. From steam to electricity, same thing. And I would argue that the equivalent of the 4-story building today is infrastructure as a service, where we're simply saying, okay, we used to run this infrastructure over here, and now we're running on Microsoft or Amazon. Really, where a lot of it's going is platform as a service, or components as a service, or software as a service, where you can run everything in an automated fashion, or leverage the brain power of other people, and of course maintain it with things like DevOps. Which is really cool, because once that rolls out, everything we're doing like 10 years ago will be totally nostalgic. I saw an article, wasn't it you who sent me the article? The 90s is back in. That makes me so happy. Because I'm waiting, because I'm sure slow ops is going to be back in, right? We're like, come to us. We'll handcraft custom computers for you with our artisanal IT engineers, bit by bit. And we even type on the keyboard. So we're a really interesting turning point where infrastructure as a service is shrinking, software as a service is growing, and that's why I think the key thing to think about is those DevOps tools, because the platform as a service for the functionality we all deliver is going to become ever more important. So how do you start building these strategies? I talk about having like a few strategies that bring everything together. What's some ways to do this? One of the ways to do it is to group first those threats into the effect they would have on the IT, the facilities, and the people, right? So asteroids, earthquakes, fire, flood, group all that together because all those are going to have a similar impact. If it's a now of service that takes your company off the internet, or there is a loss of power that takes your building down, if everyone is relying on the internet, it's the same impact, right? So you can group all these things up to a few different effects and not have to maintain 1,000,001 scenarios. Now I'll tell you, anyone who does compliance governance is going to say, yeah, but you still need to list those because the auditor is going to come in and say, wait, I don't see that you've got anything in your BCP plan for asteroid strikes. So still have to list them all in appendix just to make the auditors happy. But rolling those open threat scenarios means you guys have to do fewer things. Then we do the opposite. We match all those business processes, payroll, HR, marketing, whatever they are, and we group them by impact. What is the high, medium, and low impacts? Sometimes you can do 4 or 5 tiers, but the high, medium, low impacts, the specific tiers for these business processes, should they be taken offline, short, medium, and long term. And then we can bring all that together, right? We can bring all that together to come up with some continuity strategies that handle several business processes when impacted by several threat scenarios, instead of having to have lots of them, right? It's a consolidation, and then a matching game. So some example scenarios. Everyone loves the work from home example. Why? Because you can say, you know, boss, I think I should work from home every other week. Why? It's for disaster recovery reasons. You never know what could happen here. But with everything being in the cloud, right, work from home becomes ever easier, as well as having in mind some thought of, okay, if they left their computer here, how will we get them back online, shipping computers, all those sort of things. The other is connectivity. Back to the data center, right? If you guys are running traditional IT, usually running like MPLS circuits. So in the cloud version of MPLS circuits like AWS Direct Connect, Azure Express Route, Google Direct Peering, basically MPLS circuits to their cloud so you have high-speed access to their resources. Now, that could break, right? We could move from one region to another. We're in US region, and for whatever reason, Azure just went down. Who knows why? Maybe it's PowerShell command, for all I know. Now we're in a different region. We're running off of EU1. How do I connect to that? So, with failover connections, you can do multiple peerings. So, same speed, same reliability. But B, when you start tiering strategies, you can think about, okay, if I am in a recovery strategy, I may have fewer users, I may have fewer things going on, I may just go to a bare bones staff, I may send a few people home for the business processes that aren't as impactful. So you can look for ways to lower cost in that recovery strategy, right? It doesn't have to be one for one in terms of performance and capacity. So what I'm starting to see here is organizations using VPNs as a way, right? So they have a VPN connection plus the direct connect or express route connection, so they still have the ability even though they degrade on service. So keep in mind when you're developing strategies, degradation in service is okay. You just lower the people as long as you're making the main business process. All right, backup and recovery. Obviously, everyone wants to go to the cloud. You back up to the cloud. Or you have two different cloud instances, and you're replicating in the storage area, and you have the ability to bring up your servers that way. Ground to the cloud, I mentioned earlier, that's the yay cloud strategy. We're starting to see people still maintain the traditional data center, but replicating the data up to a public cloud, not spinning up the compute, so they don't have to spend the money on the compute cycles, but just having it there in case they need to recover. Region to region for platform as service and infrastructure as a service. Obviously, I already mentioned EU to US, and you guys get that idea. But having multiple copies and the ability to replicate data functionality components from one region to another. And then manual processing. So if something does break, maybe we have a way that people can do their own stuff, can do it manually, can back up and wait. If you think about Delta being down for 5 hours, it took them 48 hours to recover. It was a real big pain in the ass, but people still got where they needed to go, right? So if we do cover, a lot of times we'll have a manual processing that says, okay, if we lose Salesforce.com for 2 days, we're going to give those guys 2 days of PTO, and we're going to ask them to come in over the weekend and catch up. So the ability to shift or do things manually. And then finally, my personal favorite, insurance, right? Cybersecurity insurance is a thing. Cybersecurity insurance is oftentimes being used as the stopgap. We'll pay X amount of money, think of a deductible to your car, and then above that, cybersecurity insurance will kick in. When you guys have the strategies that are mapped to multiple threats and covering multiple business processes, the key thing here is to do fewer things better, right? Develop a few proven strategies that work very well, that are cost-effective given the type of risk impact you might have, but just a few of them, and then do them really, really well, and test and rinse and repeat, right? They need to be ones that are funded using that impact analysis I talked about earlier. They need to be ones that are detailed, that have runbooks so people know what to do, that have documented tactics so that it's been performed quite frequently, and they need to be exercised, right? That people actually run it, and not just the IT people confirm that the data got over, but the applications people confirm that they still could work, the DevOps people confirm that they still could work, and absolutely paramount that the business folks confirm that their business processes were still going. And there's a good reason for that, right? In every single plan, something goes wrong. Things never quite work out the way they want. You have the best plans in place. I've got a great run book. And it goes sideways. When I was at the financial services firm, we would do 4 recovery tests, 1 a quarter. And we did that for a reason, because we told the auditors we did 1 a year. We picked the one that we did really well at. Because there was always something that just got just close enough, but then didn't work. But that's okay. That's really okay, because By doing these exercises, A, you're building up the mental muscle. By doing these exercises, B, you're figuring out that if your documentation is strong or not. But C, you're creating this positive feedback loop where each one of those exercises you get a little smarter, get a little bit better, get a little more accurate so that you guys know what to do. Right? Big, big, huge fan of exercises for business continuity. All right, you guys know what this is? This is my shameless plug. That was bad. I am a dad. That's my dad humor for the day. Yeah, I know. So, in terms of security exercises, not for business continuity, but for the instant response is a very similar approach. Just so you guys know, I'm running a training tomorrow at 10 a.m. for that, where we walk through how you would do that specifically for instant response. But it's the same exact concept, right? Whatever you guys are doing, once we have the plan in place, exercise, drill, so that people know what to do and what happens next. All right, in conclusion, in the great old days when clouds came, we were excited and we said, that cloud belongs in my four walls. I need a private cloud because cloud sounds cool, but I want it in my data center. But pretty quickly, right, over the past 10 years, more and more applications have went into software as a service or platform as a service. 90% of all Fortune 1000 today are on Amazon or Azure for platform as a service. 100,000 people, businesses total in AWS. Again, 150 million lost in 4 hours, just in AWS being down. And the average cloud or organization is running 920 cloud apps. Cloud is here, cloud is moving strong, and more we're moving into platform, and more we're moving in software as a service, where business continuity is less about the boxes I can touch and the things I can type, and more about vendor risk management and the procedures I put in place. Now, thankfully, some things have never changed, right? We still need to start off that business impact analysis. We still need to know what we have and what it means. Asset management and basic blocking tackling is so paramount. And then we need to protect against that impact, not just against the event, and do so with a few proven strategies that we try again and again and again, and are tied back to how much money we have and are justifiable and effective. But some things have changed, right? We got new threats. We got name cyber gang here that has done some bad stuff to people recently. Huge flash ransoms like WannaCry, DNS going down, core infrastructure going down, vulnerabilities everywhere. That's why we're at conferences like this, because that stuff scares the hell out of us, and it's kind of exciting. And now we also have all these assets that are outside of our control, right? It's no longer a box that we touch. It's a contract that we own and that we enforce for our vendors. That allows us to have new continuity strategies like I was mentioning with peer-to-peers, using the cloud-based native tools for replication, using application-based tools in the Elk Stack and Mongo and other for replication, and using those things to do what used to be a backup tape in days, now is in click in a few hours. And more, business continuity and disaster recovery is becoming a team sport because IT is becoming bigger, broader, with a wider set of people doing a wider set of things, and because we're relying on all these vendors in the cloud who are providing us services to make sure things work. But if we bring it all together, and we have a good plan, and we exercise that plan regularly, and still stay true to the fundamentals, while hopping on what's come out today, right? We're making the best use of cloud, and not just using it to wrap another belt around things. I think these are the actions that will define continuity in the 21st century. And these are the actions that are going to allow us to provide availability, good business service, and good attestation to our organizations that, yeah, we're protecting you. Yeah, we got your backs. Yeah, we're going to make sure you can do your job. Because by golly, I want my paycheck and I want to make sure that I'm the IT guy to support you. Right? That's all I got. I've got a couple minutes, probably like 1 minute for one question if anyone has anything. If not, there's my contact info. Going once, going twice? Oh, hey.
So with regard to the $150 million typo, because you mentioned resiliency, there's this concept within the DevOps community of deployment postmortems.
Yes.
And one of the concepts, or one of the practices, I guess, within deployment postmortem is to not, obviously, lay blame on a human because of the failure of a system. So one could argue, and a lot of people did after the Amazon incident, that it wasn't the person's fault for making the typo, it was the system's fault for allowing the person to make that typo. And I guess the reason I bring it up is adding blameless postmortems to incident response or disaster recovery plans after everything's all cleaned up can lead to more resilient systems and prevent incidents and disasters.
Absolutely. So I'm going to say that again for the camera in a really short form. So blameless postmortems is a huge thing in DevOps. When Amazon went down, I'm having fun at this guy's expense, but obviously we should blame the system, right? If you get in a car accident and your head hits the steering wheel, was it your fault or was it the fact that you didn't have an airbag, right? You should have had some protections around him. I agree. And the concept of blameless response and reviews after the fact is such that when implemented creates a culture where you really can fail fast forward and you really can get more information because no one's hiding things. I was in a leadership workshop today where I was hearing a conversation where an intern had crashed a company. And you're like, oh wow, and who got fired? That was the first thing asked, who got fired? They're like, oh, no one. We went, oh, that was stupid. We shouldn't let the interns crash the company. Right? I love that concept of blameless because we really need to, especially in disaster recovery and exercises and everything, reduce who did what wrong and look at it as a system and act together to cause positive change. Yeah. Anyone else? Yep.
You see, as we move to the cloud, the ability for people to start losing DR and DCP-DR, because if you architect it correctly and you use infrastructure as code, you don't really need recovery.
Yeah, so if we move to the cloud and you got good architecture and good DevOps and good automation, do you even need recovery? Yeah, so that's when you get into the argument, and it's a philosophical one, and I love it. If the recovery is fast enough, was it really recovery or was it just high availability? Right? So if you've got multiple different zones and you built things up accurately, if it happens, does it matter? And hopefully it doesn't. Now, I would argue that behind the scenes, high speed recovery or high availability is still something that should be looked at from the lens of if we didn't do this, what should it cost? But as we get closer to that, we should have to do fewer and fewer steps in our runbooks, fewer and fewer things behind the scenes to execute on the recovery. Should be as automated and as quick as possible. Yeah. All right. With that, I'm going to get you back to CircleCityCon. Thanks all for coming out today. I hope you have a great conference.